Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. And I am your host, Nora Muhammad. I'm glad to be back with you. This episode will be released, I believe, Monday is Christmas, December 25th, Christmas Day. I hope that everyone who is celebrating is doing so safely, wisely, and with all sobriety. As I've said before in previous episodes, it's important that we close out one year not having to recover in the beginning of the new year. So regardless of how we are celebrating this time of the year, those who are celebrating Christmas, those who will be celebrating Kwanzaa, let us remember that it's so important that we remember the principles. Sometimes we put the celebration or the ceremony ahead of the principle, and we miss out on opportunities of growth and learning. And when I talk about sobriety, I'm not just talking about sobriety from actual intoxicants like drugs or alcohol, but I'm also talking about the intoxicant of spending, the intoxicant of the stress from the spending, the intoxicant of, the celebration and everything that goes along with the celebration of a holiday. And we forget that there are actual principles that we should be remembering, teaching to our children, and keeping as our standards. And I'm excited about the conversation for this episode. This episode and actually the next episode of the podcast. Both episodes, I'm going to be talking about fathers and the importance of fathers and involve fathers in a child's life. I came across some facts from the Center for Disease Control recently, and I thought that I should share it here on the podcast. It's so important for us to not take on the modern language or the modern mindset, I'll say, the modern mindset that fathers are negligible, optional, insignificant, or unimportant in the child's life. And we put so much emphasis on motherhood, and often fathers and the role that fathers play to the child is not considered, it's not valued. And we have, through even the courts, right, culture and courts, we diminish the value of fathers. And so I'm going to share some statistics that I came across from the CDC, and then just share 5 areas in a child's life in which a father is vital, and a father's presence and support is important. But first, just a few statistics. This is from the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, and this is regarding fatherless homes. 90% of all homeless and runaway youth are from fatherless homes. 71% of high school dropouts are from fatherless homes, and 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. And so we can talk about the presence of a father, but we also have to recognize how the absence of a father in a child's life is awful for the child, and it's damaging and detrimental to our society. And so let's talk about these 5 areas of a child's life where fathers make significant impacts. The first is communication. There are studies that are telling us that children that have involved fathers are better at communicating with people outside of the home. Mothers we talk to our children, but fathers talk to children in ways that are different than we as mothers. Their language, their cadence, Um, and as mothers, well, hopefully we're getting our children to talk, and we're, some mothers, I've heard some mothers tell their children to be quiet, stop talking so much, but that's just the nature of a child, and especially in those early years when children are very, very curious and are constantly asking why and how questions. And so, yes, mothers, we do get the children talking, but there are different ways that we communicate. There's different ways, there's different um, types of language that men use that are just different than women. And so sometimes we won't really be aware of the contribution that a father plays to child's language skills and a child's ability to communicate. When a child goes out into the world, they're not just going to deal with women, and we see that women, fill classrooms across the country. And it's so good to have male teachers in the classrooms because men speak differently than women. But let's bring this down to the home and having a child hear a father's voice and having to respond to the way fathers ask questions that are different than the ways that mothers ask questions, or the ways fathers give instructions that are different than the way mothers give instructions. So a child's ability to communicate is enhanced when the father is in the household. Resilience. Resilience is the way a child or an individual is able to deal with a challenge, is able to face challenges or crises or conflicts. And so the father's presence definitely enhances the resiliency of a child. You can see the difference between the way mothers deal with a child's challenges and the way fathers deal with a child's challenges. Mothers are nurturing. Mothers are comforting. Mothers want children to feel safe and protected. We kind of like to cocoon our children. And that's just the nature of a woman. And fathers often, yes, they want to comfort their child, but they also want to increase the child's confidence by helping that child face that consequence or face that challenge, face that conflict, explore the nature of the conflict, explore the challenge. When I think about mothers kind of doing the cocoon thing and, wanting to shelter the child, the father kind of walks the child right up to the conflict and say, now, how are you going to handle this? And because men and women do deal with conflict and challenges and circumstances that are difficult, we deal with those differently. It's a benefit to our children when they have not just the mother's way of managing the challenge or helping the child manage the challenge, but also to have the father there too, so that child is developing in a balanced way. Another way fathers help with children. Now, we talked about communication. We talked about resilience. But also, fathers enhance motherhood. A good father helps motherhood be good for the mother, right? So a good father makes moms better. And this starts right from the moment a child is born. When a woman is receiving support from her husband, that has an impact. One, it can impact postpartum depression, but it can also impact the wellness and the mental stability of the mother, because she knows that she has a partner there. She has someone that is, she doesn't have to be the only one thinking about the child and the child's needs. She doesn't have to be the only one thinking about shelter, thinking about food, thinking about heat, thinking about water, making sure the child is going to be in a safe and stable environment, that she has someone there with her who also is giving mind to these considerations and addressing it. I speak with single mothers, and they talk about the challenges that they face because they say, I'm doing it all by myself. I'm doing it all by myself. So think about all of the stress that mother is having in her life, the stress that she's trying to perhaps hide from her children, but it may not always be easy to hide a mother's stress from her child. So when there is a father, a good father that's there, that's present for the child, that enhances motherhood. Now, you can email me and say, well, my father's child, my child's father, he didn't this and he didn't that, right? And so we can also talk about choices and another episode. But right now, I'm talking about how a child's father and the presence of a child's father, the involvement of a child's father enhances the well-being and the overall outcomes for children. Emotional stability. Children who have involved fathers, they are half as likely to experience depression and depressive symptoms. When a child's father is absent, research is showing us that the psychological harm of that absence is experienced during childhood and it persists during the course of that child's life. That means into adulthood. Children whose fathers are absent from their lives, unfortunately, have to deal with the uncertainty, the questions, the insecurity, the instability that they may experience. Because generally, if a child's father is not in a child's life, we don't see that as a good thing. The child's identity, right? Yes, the child gets a portion of itself from its mother, his or her mother, but the child also gets the qualities of the father. And so to have qualities and not to be able to attribute it to someone that they're having an interaction with, that impacts a child. That impacts a child's confidence and sense of self, where we always want to know where we come from. We always want to know who we come from. And even if someone is adopted into a good family, the child's desire to want to know that birth family doesn't diminish or isn't present just because the adoptive family was loving and caring. No, we're always in search of self and the origins of self. And so not having that other half of that child's parentage, it definitely impacts the child. And then those circumstances where there has been divorce, abuse, trauma, and not all divorces are traumatic, but we can, as adults, separate in very ugly ways, and those behaviors and those awful words that we think and say to our children about their other parent, that's very, very detrimental. So the presence of a father enhances the emotional stability of the child and reduces depressive symptoms. And in that statistic that I shared with you, 63% of youth suicides are of youth who come from fatherless homes, right? So, I mean, there's real things here for us to consider. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you about how a child's father and how that involvement enhances or supports the wellness of the child, I'm going to talk about achievement. When children have actively involved fathers, they are 43% more likely to get A's in school. They're 33% less likely to repeat grades, to be left back when their fathers are involved. And children who feel that they have a closeness to their father, they're twice as likely to enter college. They're more likely to find stable employment after high school. They're 75% less likely to have a teen birth. They're 80% less likely to spend time in jail. We cannot understate, or no, we can understate, we do it often. We cannot overstate the importance of a child having his or her father in the life of that child. Again, I'll go back to those CDC statistics. 90% of all homeless and runaway youth come from fatherless homes. 71% of youth without fathers in their homes become high school dropouts, or 71% of high school dropouts come from homes without fathers. And 63% of youth suicides are youth and children from homes without fathers. So we cannot overstate the role that a father has and the value that a father has in the life of that child. And we can't be so self-centered and inconsiderate and reckless that we make choices that eliminate a father or make it hard for a child to have a relationship with the father. As mothers, as women, I would say that we have to put our children beyond what it is that happened. If we and that father, if a mother, if a woman and a father aren't together, well, that's unfortunate if the relationship, if the family, if the marriage cannot be salvaged. However, we should never, never, ever interrupt the involvement of a child with their father. It is not about us and our own personal needs and our own personal egos and our own personal hurt. We should be thinking always about the outcome that we want with that child and do everything we can to support that outcome. And the best way for children to have the greatest outcomes is to have that father in that child's life, in the home, preferably, but definitely as active and involved as that father can be. I'm interested in your thoughts. I'm interested in your comments. You can always email me at nora@noraspeaks.com. And I look forward to next week's episode where we're going to continue talking about the importance of a father in a child's life. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, stay in peace.
We were brought here as a piece of property. And to keep that piece of property, it is to not allow the property to know the value of the property. What I mean by that, if you had known the history of yourself, you would not have been made a slave. And you won't be a slave now if you have a knowledge of yourself. It's hard to enslave a person that have equal knowledge with you. You just can't do it. And so this knowledge of yourself is the thing that will free you from what you have been suffering from.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, noramahammed.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.